The next example we're going to look at is simple interest, and this is a type of an arithmetic sequence. And the way that simple interest works is that you get a fixed amount of interest added to your bank account every month. So you've got a full amount that you have borrowed or been lent for the entire period, and then you're charged only the interest on that initial amount. So interest is denoted with I. P is the principal, so that's the initial amount of the loan or the initial amount that you borrowed. R is my interest rate, so R is typically written as a percent. Per annum means every year or per year. So that is per year. And T is my length of time measured out in years for simple interest. So my simple interest formula then is going to be interest is equal to the principal times the interest rate. So I'm going to write my interest rate as, given that my interest rate is typically a percent, I'm going to write R over 100 to convert it into a decimal. So this is the amount of interest that I pay, and I pay that every year. So I multiply it by the number of years that I'm paying the interest. If your interest rate was, so this is if R is given as a percent of interest. If your rate was already given as the decimal, then we would have PRT. So either way, make sure that you're converting your interest rate into a number that makes sense. So let's look at it down here. Calculate my simple interest on a loan of $8,000. Well, my P is going to be 8,000. My R is 7%, so I could write that as 0.07. My time is 18 months. 18 months is, of course, 1.5 years. So then my interest is going to be 8,000 times 0.07 times 1.5. And my units here are going to be dollars. So let's work that out. We've got 8,000 times 0.07 times 1.5, and we get $840. So this means if you're going to pay back your loan, you'll pay back all 8,000 plus the 840. But it only asked me for the interest, so I'm going to stop there. But if we had been asked the total amount of money, they'd be asking for our balance. And so balance is given by the formula where we take our initial amount of money, the principal, and then add in all the interest that we've paid. Of course, we just said that the formula for interest is PRT. So looking at this, as I said earlier, simple interest is an arithmetic sequence. So if I think about expanding this, basically I'm paying this amount of interest every year. So my balance is my initial amount plus my first amount of interest and the second amount of interest, which is always the same. So my first term is the principal, and my common difference, the amount that I'm adding every time, is my interest. But it's the interest calculated for 1 year. Notice that this gets written this way. Normally, an arithmetic sequence has the form of first term plus common difference times n minus 1. Well, for money, because we think of the first term as the initial amount of money, the initial amount of money is like our 0th term, right? When we find initial money, when we talk about initial time, that's when t equals 0. So if I write this as an arithmetic sequence and I label this as my first term, well then I don't actually pay interest until the end of that first year. So that happens when my n equals 2. So it's like saying at the start of the second year, you owe your balance plus the interest from the year before. But just thinking of it in terms of instead writing that your balance is P plus PRT, and now we know that if T equals 0, we have our initial amount. If we think of it in the sequence though, then I would really want my money after the first year to just be P. So then I would have PR times T minus 1. So this is my way that I can think of it as an arithmetic sequence. And of course, this would end up being my UN for amount of money that I owe at the end of that, at the start of that year. So if I have U1 here, then the amount of money that I have for the first year is just the balance. At the start of the second year, it's balance plus the principal. But again, easier to just think of it in this form. So let's do that down here. So we invest $3,500 at 4.25% simple interest, determine the balance of her account after 8 years. So after 8 years means I've paid 8 years of interest. So my balance is going to be the principal plus the principal times the interest rate times 8 years. So at the end of the 8th year, you've paid interest 8 times.